They say blood is thicker than water, but they never tell you what happens when that blood turns toxic. Imagine working for 3 years, pouring your life savings, your sanity, and your soul into a dream, only to watch it crumble in a single afternoon. I thought I just had bad luck. I thought the universe was against me. But it wasn't the universe. It was the man sitting at my dinner table every Sunday. My own uncle destroyed my business, launch out of pure, petty jealousy. Well, here's the thing about trying to bury a seed. You just make it grow. This is how I lost everything. Found the knife in my back and used it to carve out an empire. The launch of Lumina Tech, my boutique smart home startup, wasn't just a business move. It was my lifeline. After leaving a suffocating corporate job, I had burned through my savings to develop a seamless home automation hub. I was 26, hungry, and perhaps a little too trusting. That's where Uncle Elias came in. Elias was the family patriarch, a man who had almost made it big in the 90s, but ultimately settled for a mid-level management role he despised. When he offered to mentor me and handle the logistics for my launch event, I didn't just accept, I was grateful. He was family. He was the business guy. I thought I was lucky. The weeks leading up to the launch were a blur of adrenaline. Elias was involved in everything. He negotiated with the venue, he handled the catering contracts, and he supposedly secured the press invites. "Leave the heavy lifting to me, kid," he'd say, clapping a heavy hand on my shoulder. "You focus on the tech." I remember looking at him with admiration, not seeing the tightness in his jaw when I talked about our pre-orders, or the way his eyes went cold when my father bragged about my potential. I didn't know that my rising star was reminding him of his own burnt-out comet. The day of the launch arrived. It was supposed to be my coronation. Instead, it was a massacre. 2 hours before the doors opened, the venue manager called the deposit hadn't been paid. I was stunned. I had written the check to Elias weeks ago. When I called him, he sounded frantic, claiming a bank error, a clerical mix-up. I drained my emergency fund to pay the venue on the spot. But that was just the first domino. The catering truck never showed up. The press list? It turned out to be empty. The journalists Elias claimed to have confirmed were never even contacted. And then, the final blow, the demo units for the presentation began to malfunction. The code had been tampered with. Standing in an empty, silent hall with a few confused friends and zero investors, I felt the shame so deep, it felt like physical pain. Elias walked in, looked at the wreckage, and sighed. "Maybe you just weren't ready for the big leagues, kid. Some dreams are too big." The weeks following the failed launch were the darkest of my life. I was broke, humiliated, and ready to file for bankruptcy. The narrative in the family was that I was incompetent, a dreamer who didn't understand the real world. Elias led this narrative, shaking his head at family gatherings, telling everyone he tried his best to save me from myself. I almost believed him. I spent days staring at the ceiling, replaying the failure, but the tech malfunction gnawed at me. The code was solid. I knew it was solid. One Tuesday, while cleaning out the office I could no longer afford, I found an iPad Elias had left behind during one of our planning sessions. It was still logged into his email. I wasn't looking for a conspiracy. I was looking for a vendor receipt, but what I found froze the blood in my veins. There were emails to a rival developer or freelancer I had fired for incompetence, asking how to introduce a delayed bug into my system. There were cancellation confirmations for the catering, sent from a burner account, but linked to his recovery email, and most heartbreaking of all, a draft email to my father that read, "Don't worry, when he crashes, I'll get him a job in my place. He needs to learn his place." It wasn't incompetence. It wasn't bad luck. It was a surgical strike. He wanted me to fail so he could remain the successful one, the patriarch who doled out favors rather than the uncle who was surpassed by his nephew. The grief was instant, but it was quickly incinerated by a white-hot rage. I realized that confronting him would do nothing. He would deny, gaslight, and spin it. If I wanted justice, I didn't need a confession. I needed a win so big it would make his sabotage irrelevant. I needed to pivot. I stopped moping. I stopped looking for investors for the hardware. I looked at the one thing that had worked, the interface software. I didn't need a venue. I didn't need catering. I needed the internet. The pivot was aggressive. I rebranded Lumina from a hardware company to a software as a service SaaS platform that could integrate with any existing device. I didn't need a launch party. I needed a viral moment. I spent the next 3 months working in isolation, cutting everyone off, including Elias. He kept calling, checking in, likely to see if I had applied for that entry-level job he promised. I played the part of the defeated nephew, feeding him false information. I told him I was giving up on tech and going to law school. He relaxed. He let his guard down. Meanwhile, I was building Nexus, the new platform. I reached out to the tech journalists he had blocked, sending them personal demos and the receipts of the Sabotaged launch, redacted to protect family privacy, but enough to show I was a victim of circumstance, which made for a great underdog story. The narrative shifted. I wasn't the failure, I was the fighter. On the day of the digital launch, I live-streamed the demo from my living room. No venue, no catering, just me and the code. The download counter started ticking. 100,000, 10,000. By the end of the week, we had hit 50,000 users. Investors who had ignored the physical launch were now sliding into my DMs. When the Forbes article dropped, the startup that rose from the ashes, I sent a physical copy to Uncle Elias. I didn't write a note. I didn't need to. At the next family gathering, I walked in not as the charity case, but as the CEO. Elias sat in the corner, silent, shrinking with every congratulatory handshake I received. I had reclaimed my trajectory not by fighting him in the mud, but by flying over him. He tried to cut my wings, but he forgot that I was the one who built the engine.